Hi, welcome to Framelines. Josh here. Today is going to be our first interview on this channel. I'm going to be speaking to Gisele Duprez, who's a photographer based in New York. We originally had plans to actually meet up in New York and film a video at Coney Island. Unfortunately, travel's obviously off the cards at the moment, so we thought we would film a video over Skype. So just super excited to speak to Gisele about all things street photography, projects, etc. So let's get into it. Here's the chat with Gisele Duprez. Hi, Gisele. Welcome to Framelines. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being our first guest. Lovely to finally meet you, albeit over Skype.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. We'll do this one day in person when we can.
For sure. So for everybody, Gisele's Instagram is @gisele.duprez, and I'll put a link to her website down below. So street photography. How did you get into street photography?
Well, I started taking photos maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Really didn't have any interest in photography before that. And I had been looking through some photos of my travels. I've taken some great trips around the world. And the photos were really crap. And I ended up doing a 365-day photo project. And those photos were still crap. But I actually made it all the way to the end. And that was the first time a hobby of mine really stuck. So in that process, my photos slowly started to improve. I got some books. I started looking at some tutorials. And I bought a DSLR and I started shooting because I liked it. And I ended up putting some photos on Flickr. And from there, I started meeting some local photographers and we started hanging out and shooting together. I didn't know that street photography was a thing until I started shooting with other people. And I realized that when I had first started, I was taking landscape photos and some other stuff. I gravitate a lot more towards people. So in that process, it shifted to kind of what street photography, most of the work I'm doing now.
Nice. Cool. So that's kind of, you started off, and then I mostly know you for taking pictures at Coney Island.
Mm-hmm.
So you go there quite a lot. How did that come about? How often do you go to Coney Island to take pictures?
I'm a native New Yorker, but I didn't grow up going to Coney Island, and I didn't really start going until a few years ago, mostly with some of these photographers that I became friends with. And I fell in love with the place, and I go now all year round. In the winter, I probably go 2 or 3 times a month. I shoot the Coney Island polar bear swimmers, and they shoot in the winters on Sundays, so I take a lot of photos with them. But in the spring and summer, and through the fall, I go on the rides, I walk the boardwalk, I go on the beach. And, in the height of the season, I probably go 10 times a month, maybe 12 times a month. It's not that far away from me. I can get there in about a half an hour by car or subway. And I just love it. I fell in love with it. And every time I go back, I love it even more.
Amazing. So your pictures for me almost kind of like capture the kind of joy at Coney Island. It just seems like a really kind of fun place to take pictures. I mean, I can tell like you've been taking pictures there a long time. You've obviously built up a kind of confidence. You take pictures with flash.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you work very close to people. How did that first come about? When did you first start trying that?
Well, the more I shoot, the closer I like to get. So when I first got a DSLR, I had a 24 to 105, and now I'm shooting 28 or 35. I have a 50. I don't use it very much. Most of the time I'm 28, 35 mostly these days. I'm trying to kind of stick to one focal length. And the flash came about. I like the effect in the summer. If you look at my Coney photos, there's a lot of bright skies and bright colors. And that can be hard to shoot in the sun, but the flash pulls up a lot of the shadows and it makes the colors pop more. And I found that in places where I am really comfortable shooting, I can use the flash and get away with it a lot more easily. I think if you're on the street with a regular camera, you take a picture and people, they don't know for sure whether you've actually taken a photo, but with a flash, somebody goes, did you just take my picture? And, you can't really deny what you've done, pretty obvious. So I started in Coney, which is where I feel very comfortable. I know my surroundings, I know people there. I feel safe. And I started with a lot of the Coney Island polar bears because I know them. So taking their photos with flash wasn't scary in any way. And then I moved to taking them on the beach. Just in the summer, I take photos of strangers on the beach. And I'm not one of those people that is a stickler or a purist for the definition of street photography. I kind of morph between true candid portrait and what I call semi-candid, which is people see me, I'm there, I've got my flash, I'm squatting down really low, I'm taking photos, but they've gone back to their regular activities. And then when you shoot with a flash, it doesn't really seem to offend anybody too much because they already see what you're up to. And that also helps me shoot children a lot. Because obviously you have to be very careful shooting kids, and parents might wonder what you're up to. You might look creepy, but I usually look for the parent and do a little verbal thing to make sure that they know and that they give me their okay. And then I'm out there with flash, and I love it. I like the effect. Most of my Coney stuff, the bright stuff, is all with the Fuji and flash on.
Nice. So people have obviously been taking pictures of Coney Island for years. Do you have any favorite pictures taken by other photographers at Coney Island, or any contemporary photographers working there now?
Yeah, people have been shooting Coney forever. You look at even Robert Frank shot Coney Island, and then you've got people like Bruce Gilden and Harvey Stein, who's been shooting for decades, and Harold Feinstein, who he took a photo that I really love of Coney. I'll send it to you. You can pop it in. It's a bunch of kids playing with a blanket and tossing another kid up in the air. And if you get a chance to see this documentary on him, and there's a lot of his Coney work in there, that's great. And Coney today, I shoot, since I'm there all the time, people know me and I know them. I run into a lot of other photographers there. I run into Donato Di Camillo a lot. Him and I are friends. Sometimes we shoot the same subjects. He usually shoots them a little more posed than I do. But I think it's something that people have been shooting for decades, and hopefully they'll keep shooting for decades more to come.
So I take a lot of pictures in the UK, in London. There's a really kind of nice street photography community in the UK, but I've always kind of seen New York as the street photography hub in the world, as it were. What's the kind of community like there for you in New York?
I think it's overall a pretty good and supportive community. As I said, I see a lot of photographers that I know in Coney, and if I go to Midtown up Fifth Avenue, I'll see a different set of people that work that area a lot. You see a lot of the same people if you go to shows and openings and try to support each other that way. There's a great group here of women street photographers. It's a group that Gulnara Samoilova started. The international element is where people have been submitting, and she's curating some exhibitions that have been going around the world. The first time she did one, it was 75 women in a group show, and then she awarded a solo show, and I was surprised and happy that she chose me. The next year, she had somebody come in and did a residency for a week with mentorship. And this year, she's opened it up even more with some sponsorship to get somebody to fly in from anywhere in the world. And then they get to stay and they get mentorship and they get an exhibition in the next show that she's going to do. So that element is open to anybody, any women in the world at Women Street Photographers. But there's also a community that she's built of people in New York. The women meet once a month or every other month or so. That's not always talking about photography. That's just a lot of potluck dinners and drinking and hanging out at somebody's apartment. But it's a good community here. And I think that most of the photographers here, they're friendly, they're welcoming, we know each other. It's good to see people out on the street, and I like it.
So I kind of have a goal, almost not really a goal, a kind of aim to try in street photography to maybe try and get a picture that people kind of remember or recognize, or something that people associate. They're like, oh yes, I know that one, you took that picture. For me, I mean, I think I actually first saw your picture of the white dogs on Coney Island. That's how I kind of got to know your work. obviously that picture's gained a lot of traction, which is brilliant. People recognize it. It's kind of, I've seen it almost everywhere at the moment now. How do you kind of feel about it? Are you a bit kind of fed up of it now? It's got so much traction, or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound ungrateful. I like that people like that photo. I like that photo. I think it's a fun photo. I get why people are, responding to that photo. It's been a finalist in a couple of street photography festivals. It has been exhibited. It's been printed in magazines. But I'm getting a little tired of it. I think that with that photo, there are photos like it, not just of mine, where the first time you see a photo, and you think that's a great photo, and then the next time you're like, yeah, that's still a really good photo, and then you see it 100 times because it keeps getting picked up and republished everywhere, and you think, oh, here we go with that photo again. And I'm starting to feel that way about the photo with the dogs, so I've kind of put it in semi-retirement a bit. Somebody just asked me to use it recently, and I said no because I think it's been a little played out. But maybe in a year or two, when people start to know me in the future and they haven't seen that, it'll come back and resurrect and get another life. But for now, I don't submit it anywhere. I just kind of put it off to the side, and you can still buy it as a print, but it's not going to be making the rounds for a little while. I think it needs to take a little rest. I mean, you must have something like that. When I think of your work, I think, is it the lady with the red and the yellow that people think is yours all the time and see?
Yeah, I think so. There's like the lady's got the red shoes, no, red shoes and the yellow when she's by the wall. Yeah, that's got. I mean, I'm still quite happy with that picture. I think it's kind of fun, but yeah, it's kind of not like a little bit fed up of looking at it now, I guess. But again, like you say, you can't be ungrateful that people like it. But I only really have like maybe 5 to 10 pictures I've taken that I'm actually kind of pleased with. So there is that whole thing about kind of keeping Instagram going and the momentum on there. So I'm a bit guilty of reposting a lot of the same pictures. So, but
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, there are photos of mine that I think are better photos with better composition or better technically, and or that I'm more attached to. And sometimes you put them on Instagram and they just fall flat. And then there were other things that you like them, but you don't think they're great, and you put them out there and they explode. So I'm trying to stay true to myself and take photos for me, photos that I like. It's hard, obviously, not to get caught up in that whole, likes and exposure and all of that stuff. But it's funny how that works, that, sometimes you really look at something and you wonder, well, why is it this one that has taken off so well? Or why does nobody like this photo that I think is great? Or from other people, you see other people's photos and you're like, that's a great photo and it's not getting any love. But just, keep doing what you do for yourself.
yeah, my general rule of thumb is if I'm pleased with it, it's not going to do well. That's my kind of
right? Seems to be the way.
Yeah. So I guess we kind of have to talk about gear a little bit. I know you used to be a bit of a kind of gear head. You've kind of kicked that habit now a bit.
Yeah, I'm a recovering gearhead. I think that I used to think that better gear would make me a better photographer. And I don't think that's true. I think with a few little exceptions, obviously if you're a sports photographer and you need something that can take a ton of photos per second, or you need a really long lens or something, that might be where gear becomes important. But I think with the type of photography that I do, almost any modern camera can take that type of shot. I mean, even iPhones can take good shots.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the photos that were taken decades ago with cameras that certainly don't have the technical capabilities of what they do today, and they're still great photos. So I really started realizing that gear is not where I want to spend my investment. I think it's more important to know your gear really well. So I've really kind of taken the 10 or so cameras that I've had and focused now on 2 of them mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And here I go saying gear's not important, and one of those 2 is a Leica M10. But, it's a holdover from the days that I was buying a lot of gear. I use that with my 35 millimeter a lot. That's most of what the Cuba photos were taken on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a Fuji with a 23, which is the 35 equivalent. And that's what most of my Coney shots with flash have been taken on. And I just keep getting closer and closer. When I first bought a DSLR, I had a 24 to 105. And now I'm at, 35 or 28 sometimes. And that's what I stick to. But these days I spend my money and my investment on books and practice. I mean, that's really what's going to make me and anybody else a better photographer is studying, finding. I think that, you don't want to copy somebody else's style, but you want to look at photos with an eye and think, why do I like this picture? Why do I think it's good? What is it that is interesting about this? And then just keep getting out there and hitting the streets. There are very few photos that I take that I actually like. It takes a lot of work. You go out and you take hundreds of photos, and on a good day, if you've taken a lot of photos and you get one that you're happy with, that's really great. I mean, it doesn't feel like great odds, but it's actually really a good accomplishment if you come home with something that you like.
For sure. So you're spending your money a bit more on books these days, like you said.
Yeah.
Do you have like New York faves or kind of all round, like all-time faves?
Well, I think from New York, like a lot of New Yorkers, I'm nostalgic for the old New York. But even older than I am, I like the work of people that were taking photos when kids used to play on the street, and people like Helen Levitt. This one I like a lot. This I don't actually know what it's called. It just says Helen Levitt.
Right.
You should be able to find that online pretty easily. And I've always been a big fan of Elliott Erwitt. I'm really attracted, and I think it comes through my photos, to joy and humor in photos. I think Elliott Erwitt does that really well. He's got a lot of books. There's some overlap with this one and his book Personal Best, but from a New York perspective, that's just Elliott Erwitt in New York is one of my favorites. He's actually one of my all-time favorite photographers, and he had a documentary a couple of months ago that opened in New York, and they brought him on stage and did a Q&A. And even though I've seen a lot of photographers in person, or even just famous people from living in New York, I did a little fangirl moment with him, and I got a picture taken. So I'll send it to you, and you can pop it in there. I couldn't help myself. And he's getting up there in years, so I took I took my chance, and I went over and got the shot taken. Those are some of my favorites.
So you talk about the kind of like old New York kids playing in the street, and you've obviously taken a lot of pictures of Coney Island and the kind of kids on the rides and stuff. Is that what led you to your series in Cuba of the kids in the nursery? Is that?
Yeah, it sort of morphed into that. I think that I don't have kids. I don't want kids. I like kids. I like kids when I can give them back to their parents and only have to, have them for a short period. But like I said, I'm attracted to joy. So kids playing, and kids are unfiltered. And, even when I am at Coney and I'm taking pictures and kids are screaming on the rides, I find something joyful in that too, which probably says that I'm a little twisted. But I started going to Cuba, and I'm half Cuban by birth. My mother was from there, and I waited a really long time to go there. And I really just fell in love with the country. And I think there's so much more to Cuba than the, classic cars or the cigar shots. I've taken those shots. I don't usually publish those shots. But I find myself attracted to the kids on the street, and they're playing in ways that I envision it used to be in New York, where kids are always just, running around with sticks and playing ball and whatever. And then I ended up at a nursery school, which the Cuban government generally doesn't want you to do, to go in there. And, they're always just kind of suspicious. But I became friends with the principal of the nursery, and she let me in and she let me photograph. And I've sort of adopted them as my little kids. I keep going back. I've gone 4 times in the last 3 years, and I bring them school supplies. And I've brought back some of the photos that I've taken, which was, something that they were really happy about. Most Cubans don't have photos of themselves printed. I'm not sure. A big part of it is like an economic reason. I also just don't know, how much access they have to get that done. Mm-hmm. But I brought photos for the kids to take home with them, and then they made a collage and they put it on the wall of the photos that I had taken. And because I'm allowed access in, I crawl around on the ground, I'm on my stomach, and the kids just keep going back to playing. And that's given me a great opportunity to get some shots that really just show the true nature of the kids. And I also like that they're not into electronics. I mean, every time I go back to Cuba, more and more there are people with cell phones, and you get the people on the street like this, but it's not everybody in their house, on their electronics. They are just out playing in the street, and kids being kids, they're coloring on paper, and they're doing, little games with balls or whatever, and it's just kind of feels like a throwback in time.
Brilliant. Cool. We'll have a few of your pictures from that series just kind of on the screen.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you, Gisele. So lovely to finally get to speak to you. They'll catch up. We will shoot Coney Island one day, I'm sure.
I will take you. I generally don't like shooting with other people. I work better alone, but when you come here, we will go, and I will take you to Coney. That's a promise. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gisele. Cheers.
Okay. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye. So I'll put a link to Gisele's website in the description below, and you can check her out on Instagram at gisele.duprez. Thanks for watching along. Hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to like and subscribe, and see you in the next one.